At a time when the world is looking at how to transit from fossil fuels to cleaner sources of energy, certain minerals have suddenly assumed importance, and policymakers are beginning to discuss the notion of strategic minerals. The concept of strategic minerals itself does not have a universal definition. It's very much a function of the context in which that particular commodity is being discussed. In my mind, there are traditionally three things that tend to migrate a mineral from being an ordinary commodity to being one that is strategic. The first is the level of supply of that particular mineral relative to demand in the world. In a situation in which the demand for a particular mineral far exceeds its availability, that mineral may immediately become strategic. And those companies or countries in possession of those minerals may then have a position of advantage. You could argue then, in that circumstance, that that mineral is strategic. Here is another case in which minerals may be deemed strategic. A good example is the time of the Cold War, when the Western world and the East were at loggerheads and each vying for power. One of the major drivers of power was military might. And one of the minerals that contributed significantly to potential military might was the substance uranium, because it was used to develop nuclear weapons. And it was believed at the time that those who could lay their hands on uranium would tilt the balance of power geopolitically. In that circumstance then, uranium moved from being an ordinary mineral substance to a potentially strategic commodity. In recent times, technological breakthroughs, especially with respect to battery storage and transition to green energy, has meant that minerals like cobalt have suddenly assumed center stage. And for countries like the DRC that are well endowed with cobalt deposits, for them, that mineral suddenly becomes strategic. So we can see from here that it's very much contextual, and one has to look at the circumstances in which that mineral is being mined and marketed at the time. But there is also one other less commonly thought of circumstance, which I think equally contributes to the notion of strategic or not strategic minerals. This is a case in which a mineral is so important to a national economy that while in the entire world that mineral may not be deemed strategic, for that particular country, because of the position that that mineral occupies in the economy of that country, that mineral, you could argue, suddenly becomes strategic. Here are two examples. The first is my country of birth, Botswana. In that country, diamonds contribute significantly to the national economy. Up to 75% of the entire foreign earnings of that country rely on diamond sales. In this context then, without diamonds, Botswana's economy would be a basket case. It's hard therefore not to see how, in the eyes of the Botswana government and its policymakers, diamond cannot be deemed strategic. The same applies for oil in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, oil is everything. And therefore, even though in today's days one might not see oil as strategic, to the extent that it is the entire hand that feeds the Saudi kingdom's coffers, then oil becomes strategic. What does this tell us? A couple of things. First, that whether a mineral is or is not strategic is contextual. Two, that the strategic nature of any mineral is not permanent. It changes with the circumstances, whether it's geopolitics, national economics, or technology. Finally, it does suggest to governments that are well endowed with minerals to be very mindful of this changing landscape and to understand the positioning of their respective minerals with respect to whether or not they assume a strategic or a critical position in the commodity market. This understanding empowers governments to make the right policies to take full advantage of their resources. Without this understanding, governments run the risk of one, either overstating their case, understating their case, of missing opportunities of leveraging their mineral wealth.